Florida State at Clemson, a potential preview of the ACC Championship game, we thought back in the offseason. Did Clemson's loss change that calculus to Duke? Did it change the conversation here? I think it's a good rebound opportunity, obviously, for Clemson. After the loss to Duke, they've been flying under the radar a little bit. They kind of struggled early against Charleston Southern. They took care of business against FAU last week. They still only averaged 5.6 yards per play. So I think the offense still very much a work in progress. Series-wise, Clemson has won 7 in a row against Florida State. So I think, to me, the storyline here is you have a Florida State team that is hungry, that is better than it showed against BC, probably looking ahead to this game. And you have Clemson, which has dominated this series recently, and with a win could sort of get back into that conversation to be, wherever top 10, top 12. This would get Clemson back on track after the loss to Duke. So I think a lot of interesting narratives and storylines going into this one.
Yeah, your preview of the ACC Championship Game rhetoric upsetting in Durham, North Carolina to folks, since they already have the tiebreaker. I listen, I agree with everything you said. They clearly started looking ahead. Florida State did, like in the middle of the third quarter against Boston College. And that was a very weird ending. So I don't know what to make of how that affects this game. I agree that they're all focused on this game. The motivation from the win streak and Clemson sort of stealing Florida State's spotlight for almost a decade. What does that do to the motivation here? Here's my question. I understand why a lot of people nationally are on Clemson. They're at home. They're kind of into a corner here, facing a potential second loss in just the fourth week of the season is like kind of unprecedented for Dabo Swinney, at least modern last few years. Like, this is dangerous territory for Clemson, caged animal kind of stuff. And I think that's why people are kind of rallying around Clemson. It's only a 2.5 point spread. But here's what I keep coming back to with looking at this game. What position on the football field is Clemson better? Like, pick any one position on the starting 22. And tell me where they are better than Florida State.
Defensive line, linebackers.
Okay.
I think secondary. Secondary is probably fairly even, or maybe give a little bit of an edge to Clemson. I think Clemson's defense is.
I got to follow up to that. So, okay, I'm not going to argue with you there. Which matchup, if you then switch it and you go Florida State receivers versus Clemson secondary, Florida State offensive line versus Clemson defensive line, Clemson offensive line versus Florida State defensive line, Clemson linebackers and secondary versus Jordan Travis. Like, if you flip it and you actually do the matchups, where's Clemson a clearly winner? Maybe defensive line versus Florida State's offensive line. Where are they clearly going to win the one-on-one matchups?
That's a great question, because that's what I've been trying to figure out, like studying this game. I think if you're Clemson, the optimistic angle would be at home, defense sort of controls this game. Like, the defensive line for Clemson is good enough to give Florida State's improved offensive line a lot of trouble here. I think also Florida State struggled last week with Thomas Castellanos, the mobile quarterback of BC. If I'm Garrett Riley and Dabo Swinney, I'm looking at that going, we got to get Cade Klubnik on the move. We got to get him, trying to create some plays outside the pocket. The other part of this is, I think, like, small things like red zone offense could really matter here. I mean, Clemson just seems to bog down once they get close to the 30-yard line or so. So, if you're Florida State, like, you can have whatever you want in between the 20 and the 40. But once we get to that point, you lock down the sort of red zone area and force Clemson to kick field goals. I mean, Clemson's bringing a kicker who was living in New York City as a graduate to try and kick this week. I mean, to me, I think if you're Florida State, like, obviously you're favored here. If you can just hold serve at the line of scrimmage, the way that Travis and Coleman and Wilson and the weapons, if Florida State gets ahead, can Clemson get back in this game knowing that they're just not hitting big plays? Or is Clemson's just offense methodical enough with Shipley and the running backs and efficient passing for Cade Klubnik to sort of turn this into a lower scoring game that they can use the defense to pull out in the fourth quarter?
I don't have the pressure rates, the data, like the analytics in front of me, but LSU provided a little bit of pressure for Jordan Travis. He had to run around a little bit. He used his legs a couple of times. He did throw an interception. They also hung a 40 spot on LSU and roasted him in the second half. Is LSU's front seven more talented than Clemson's front seven, even without Mason Smith, who did not play in that game? Probably. I think you can pressure Jordan Travis. I don't think you can cover those receivers. I just don't. In fact, I'm not sure anyone can. So you guys know me. I've been on the Florida State bandwagon from the beginning of the entire season. I'm sticking with it. I think they make a statement. I think it's close in the first half, and just like the LSU game, Jordan Travis makes plays down the field, and the X plays are the difference. The red zone conversions are the difference. Special teams could be a big factor here, but I'm going red zone. I'm going X plays. I'm going Travis. Florida State is better at almost everything. I think Florida State, I think there's like 7 years of built up frustration here that Florida State exercises on Saturday. And I think the kick time helps them. I think the kick time helps them in a big way. This is not 8:00 Eastern time where all of Death Valley is lubed up for 12 hours. This is early in the day. This is going to be a quieter-ish crowd, as quiet as Clemson gets. It's pretty loud, but I think that kick time helps benefit Florida State. I think Florida State wins big. Lay the points.
I like Florida State too. I will also say that if Florida State loses this game, they're still fine.
But think about the motivation to know that if you just win this one, which already has loaded amounts of gravity anyway, historically, that if you win this one, you can coast into the ACC Championship game with another loss and probably get into the playoff. Yeah. So I just think there's so much to play for Florida State here. Norvell, motivated, fired up, pissed off for greatness. I think Florida State win. Now, big against Clemson, by the way, is like 10, 12, 14 points. I'm not calling it a 30-point blowout here, but 31-21, 31-17, I think it's a fairly easy win for Florida State, and they show us that they belong in the top four.
I think I mentioned his name. Top two, yeah. I think I mentioned his name, but I do think we need to mention Will Shipley one more time, because if Clemson wins on Saturday, it's Will Shipley having a big afternoon, and he's the Klubnik, and the ability to hit big plays are important. But if Shipley's having a good day, Clemson's offensive line's winning the line of scrimmage, that's a bad sign for Florida State.
This is going to sound like an insult, but it's not meant as one. I think Will Shipley's like the worst good player that Clemson's ever had. You know what I mean? Like, he's a good player. He's a very good player.
Yeah, he's really good. Yeah.
But he's not like take over the game special and like defeat somebody, carry you to victory kind of thing. Does that make sense? Like, he's a very good player.
It makes sense, but he could this Saturday.
You said that. I think Florida State wins easy.